the way these bits were made, and these are called a twist bit, is this metal here, the round shaft, was pounded flat by a trip hammer. They heated this back up, they grabbed it, they spun it, and it gave you this helical, it's called a flat, or twist bit. So they grabbed it and twisted it. In the end, once they got done twisting it, they formed, and these are the different parts we're going to go over real quick. This is your lead screw. This is actually what pulls it through the wood. This right here is called the spur. There's two of them on this bit. And then this port here is actually what does the work. This is called the lift chisels. This tool is actually a mortising tool. It cuts a round mortise, in other words, a hole in wood. And it doesn't do it by the means by which of tearing wood out of the way. It literally, it cuts the edge. The lip here cuts just like you were fielding something with a chisel. And then the lift chisels, note the name, actually lift the wood up out of the way. The flutes here between the twists are actually where the debris is stored, similar to the mouth of a plane stores the riving. This is where the debris is stored. Once the bit is buried deep enough in the wood, it'll actually clog itself up. So you want to undo these often if you're going to drill deep. If these spurs are not intact, if this lead screw doesn't exist, sometimes it's a spur itself, it's just a point without thread. But if it's missing, except for a certain type of bit called a ship auger, these will not work, especially if the lift chisels and the spurs are missing. If I put this into a piece of wood and I smear a nail all to hell, it's going to break these chisels off here. It's not going to work ever again. I'm done. So when you get a set of these, you pay attention. You look real close. They're going to hit you for a good set of bits, especially a set of bits like these Russell Jennings. Don't be surprised at $75 for a bit, for a set of 13 bits. So, it's your money. Pay attention. Now, there are two types of lead screws you're going to find most common. There are actually three different. There's coarse, medium, and fine thread. This is a coarse thread here, and I'm going to pull out a fine thread. Fine thread is designed to be used for hardwoods, where the coarse thread is designed to be used for softwoods. You'll take and find a coarse thread brace, and this is or auger. You'll find them in all of the different auger configurations. All have fine, medium, or coarse. If you try to take this coarse thread into, say, oak, it's too fast. The lift chisels can't cut it fast enough. Use the finer thread so it takes slower scalloping cuts. If I'm going into a pine, this fine thread is going to clog with fiber. I'm going to need a coarser thread in order to get it to cut. So if every time you go to run your lead screw into the wood, if it pulls loose and the fibers pull loose, you're going to need to go to a coarser. The mediums are kind of really tough to come up with. Pretty much by the 1900s, they'd settled on coarse and fine. If you have to default to anything, default to the fine, because at least you can do the hardwoods if you're doing cabinetry work. Very few of you guys are using 2x4s and stuff, but repairs around the house, making your own workbench and things of this nature, you're going to be running 2x6s. You're going to be making holes for your bolts and things of this nature. I much prefer these over any power drill as far as clearing out and cutting a nice deep hole. When you're using an auger, it cuts a nice clean shouldered hole. It doesn't blow out the fibers to the side. When it comes out the other side, the first thing you'll see is the lead screw here will come through. And then these spurs will cut it out, and usually it has a nice release on the back side. Like anything else, you may have to use a backer board on the back of the wood to get a nice clean cut. But the interesting thing about it is if I push a regular drill through, say it's a 1/2 inch, and then try to push a 1/2 inch dowel rod through, a lot of times the drill just smacks wood out of its way, just beats it out of the way, heats it up, swells it, and the dowel rod won't fit. If I take a 1/2 inch auger and run it through, chances are I have such a nice clean hole, the sides are soft, that I have no trouble sliding a dowel rod in there for pinning and stuff. So consequently, most of when we're doing pinning work for chairs or tables and like that, I always use some sort of auger bit to make my holes with rather than trying to use a drill. Now, the Russell Jennings patterns, they were made up into the Second World War. They're common out there, but they're finite. They get to be expensive. You can get a different pattern here, which is a more common pattern. It's called an Irwin. That's who patented it originally. And it's interesting for the fact that unlike the twist bit where they pounded it flat and twisted it, these are actually ground with stones. And so they're made by machines rather than by a foundry. And you'll have this shaft of steel that's been laid down. The square shank is smacked onto it with a trip hammer, and then different stones are applied to drill this out. Now the interesting thing, you'll see one helix here instead of two you see on the twist bit, but when it comes to the end, they wanted to use 2 spurs and 2 lift chisels. So right the last 3/4 inches, you'll suddenly start to see a second helix come up and forming the mouth. And now I have 2 lift chisels and 2 spurs. But as it comes down through here, I lose one of them. And what that does is between here in the space between the different turns here, I have much more room to hide debris. So these can consequently be run a little faster. They clear themselves out a little bit. And you'll find when you're using breast drills, which are much faster than a hand drill, the breastplate fit on your chest and it was a 2-handed drill. That's what I call them, breast drills. These were very helpful. The fact that this has a pretty fast helix to it, you're going to notice this is a coarse thread. They expected you to use this on not fine wood, basically. Irwin did make a fine point, but for the most part, you'll find most of the Irwin patterns will be a coarse thread.